There seems to be a mistake, sir. We need you to move to accommodate our VIP passenger, Jessica, the flight attendant said, her tone condescending despite the polite words. This seat is reserved for only our platinum members. You don't belong and can't sit here behind her. Stood Karen Wickfield, an elegantly dressed white woman tapping her designer watch impatiently. Her eyes darted between Marcus, the black man, in the seat he occupied, C2A, which she clearly considered her rightful place. Before we jump into this incredible story, hit that like button, drop your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that challenge the status quo. Let's get started. A seat to fight for Marcus Richardson had faced countless battles in his life. From growing up in the rough streets of South Chicago to building a billion-dollar tech empire, he'd seen it all. But nothing had prepared him for what would happen during a routine flight that morning. Attendant's smile tightened, a flicker of surprise crossed her face, quickly, replaced by determination. I understand, sir, but this particular seat is typically reserved for a better customer, pointing to Karen Whitfield, our regular platinum member who flies with us. Frequently. The implication was clear regardless of his status. Marcus didn't belong in that seat. Passengers began to notice phones slowly emerged. The whispers started. What the flight crew didn't know was that this simple act of discrimination would change everything in the next few hours, not just for them, but for the entire airline, because the person they underestimated held their fate in his hands. This story is the best example of when karma arrives with a first-class ticket of its own. Have you ever been treated unfairly, simply because of how you looked? Drop your experiences in the comments below, and if you stand against prejudice and injustice being served, hit that subscribe button right now and type justice and where you're watching from in the comment section. Marcus wasn't just any passenger at 42, he was the founder and CEO of Right Tech Solutions, a $8 billion AI company specializing in customer service technology. His software helped companies identify and eliminate bias in their customer interactions, which is ironic considering what was about to unfold. But Marcus's story began long before his success growing up in South Chicago. He taught himself to code at just 11 years old on a second-hand computer. While other kids played video games, Marcus built them, creating simple programs that eventually evolved into complex algorithms. His path wasn't easy. When Marcus was 16, his father was killed in an attack that shook his community. Standing at his father's grave, young Maris made a promise that would define his life and make people see each other as human beings. First, that promise fueled 2 decades of relentless work. Starting his company in a tiny apartment, Marcus is coded for 18 hours a day while working odd jobs to pay rent. Earlier that day at the airport, security cameras captured Marcus helping an elderly woman struggling with her luggage, patiently assisting her to find her gate. He held doors open for strangers, thanked every service worker by name, and tipped generously at the airport cafe. Not because he was being watched, but because that's who Marcus Richardson was. Humble despite his success, kind despite his power. Now he was traveling to deliver the keynote address at the Global Ethics and Technology Conference. As Marcus settled into his first-class seat, a seat he had specifically chosen for its legroom, so he could work during the flight, he chose to fly with Skylux Airlines because it was the epitome of luxury air travel, where first-class tickets cost more than some people's monthly rent. Their platinum MERS enjoyed heated towels, champagne service, and seats that reclined into full beds. But behind this polished exterior, Skylux was desperately trying to modernize. Their booking systems were outdated. Their customer service rankings had slipped, and they were eagerly pursuing a partnership with a major tech company to revolutionize their operations. They needed this deal badly. What the Skylux crew didn't realize was that, sitting in seat 2A, was the CEO of the very company they hoped would save them. Flight attendant Jessica Miller had been with Skylux for 8 years. She prided herself on knowing the preferences of regular first-class passengers. She always made sure Karen Wickfield got her preferred seat. 2A, the one currently occupied by Marcus. Jessica had bills to pay and knew that Karen's generous tips helped make her mortgage each month. "Sir, we have a platinum member who always sits in this particular seat," Jessica said, leaning down toward Marcus. Would you mind moving to another class? Her tone was polite but carried an undercurrent of expectation, the kind that assumed compliance was the only acceptable response. Marcus looked up from his tablet. Momentarily confused, he reached for his boarding pass and showed it to Jessica. "I'm sorry, but this is my assigned seat," he explained calmly. "I'm also a Platinum member." Karen Whitfield stood in the aisle, making no attempt to hide her annoyance. Other passengers could clearly hear her when she said, "I always sit there on this route. It's practically my seat." The situation was quickly becoming uncomfortable. Several passengers were now watching the interaction unfold. Jessica shifted her weight from one foot to another, glancing nervously. "Between Marcus and Karen, sir. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another section." Jessica suggested, her implication clear. She wasn't offering him another first-class seat. Marcus remained composed. "No, thank you," he replied firmly. "I've selected this seat specifically for the legroom, as I need to work during the flight." Jessica's smile tightened. She nodded curtly and walked toward the front of the cabin, where she occasionally glanced back at Marcus. What happened next was secretly caught on camera by a passenger across the aisle. Karen stepped forward, seemingly to put her bag in an overhead compartment. As she did, she slipped a folded stack of notes into Jessica's pocket with practiced discretion. "I appreciate your help with this situation," Karen whispered just loudly enough for the nearby passengers to hear. Jessica's face flushed as he accepted the money. In that moment, a simple seating dispute transformed into something far more sinister, a bribe, to discriminate against a passenger based on appearance. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted. Trevor, the cabin supervisor, approached Marcus's seat with the confident stride of someone accustomed to having his authority unquestioned. His posture was rigid, his expression fixed in what he likely believed was professionalism. "Sir, we need you to move to accommodate our VIP passenger." Trevor announced loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request, but a command. Marcus looked up from his tablet again, his expression calm but his eyes revealing a weary familiarity with such encounters. "I've shown my boarding pass and platinum status," Marcus replied evenly. "This is my signed seat." Trevor's face tightened. A muscle twitched near his jaw as he leaned in slightly, his voice taking on a condescending tone that made several nearby passengers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Perhaps you're unfamiliar with how things work on this airline," Trevor said, emphasizing each word, as if speaking to a child. "We accommodate worthy customers who have specific preferences by now." The confrontation had captured the attention of nearly everyone in the first-class cabin. A businesswoman across the aisle discreetly angled his phone toward the interaction, openly recording the escalating situation. Within hours, these videos would be viewed millions of times online. Karen remained standing in the aisle, her designer handbag clutched against her chest, her impatience becoming increasingly theatrical. She checked her watch dramatically before letting out an exaggerated sigh that echoed through the cabin. "I have an important meeting right after landing," she announced, to no one in particular. "I need my usual seat. This is beyond ridiculous." The other passengers' expressions told the real story. "You should get out of the seat. He doesn't even look like someone that can afford it anyway," one of them said. Trevor, emboldened by Karen's performance, leaned down closer to Marcus. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But in the tense quiet of the cabin, his words were still audible to those nearby. "Sir, we can do this the easy way, or we can make this difficult. Your choice." The threat hung in the air. A moment stretched into seconds as passengers held their breath, waiting for Marcus's response. Many people might have yielded at this point, the pressure of public confrontation, the implicit threat, desire to avoid further escalation. But Marcus Richardson wasn't. Most people. His calm never wavered as he looked Trevor directly in the eyes. "I'm not moving," he stated firmly. "This is my seat." 6 simple words delivered, without anger or aggression, but with absolute certainty. Trevor's face flushed red. This wasn't going according to plan. He straightened up, adjusted his uniform tie, and without another word walked briskly toward the front of the cabin. He picked up the service phone, his back to the passengers, but his agitated gestures were visible to all the lines had been drawn. What should have been a routine flight was about to become something none of the people involved would ever forget. The tension in the cabin was palpable, as Trevor spoke urgently into the service phone. Passengers exchanged glances, some typing furiously on their phones, others watching with undisguised interest. Marcus had returned to reviewing his presentation, his calm exterior revealing nothing. What must have been going through his mind? 5 minutes passed before the cockpit door opened. Captain James Reynolds emerged, his weathered face set in a professional mask, as he followed Trevor down the aisle. Jessica trailed behind them, visibly uncomfortable with the escalating situation. The captain's appearance signaled to everyone that this had moved. Beyond a simple seating dispute, this was now an official intervention. Captain Reynolds stopped beside Marcus's seat, towering above the seated passenger. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Sir, I understand there's a situation." The captain began, his tone measured but firm. "My crew has the authority to assign seats as needed for the comfort and convenience of all passengers." Marcus looked up at the 3 airline employees now standing over him. The power dynamic wasn't subtle, 3 standing, 1 seated yet. Marcus's composure never wavered. "Captain." "With all respect," Marcus replied, his voice steady, "I have a confirmed seat assignment and platinum status. I've selected this specific seat for the legroom. I need to work during the flight. There's no policy that requires me to give up my assigned seat to another passenger who simply prefers it." Trevor's lips curled into what could only be described as a smirk, the expression of someone who believed they held all the cards. "Sir, if you continue to be uncooperative, Trevor," he interjected, "we'll have no choice but to remove you from the flight." The threat landed like a physical blow. Marcus's eyebrows raised slightly, the first sign of genuine surprise he'd shown throughout the confrontation. "Are you threatening to remove me because I won't give up the seat I paid for?" he asked, his voice reflecting disbelief. The question hung in the air, its implications impossible to ignore. What possible justification could there be for removing a passenger who was simply occupying his assigned seat? Before the captain could respond, Karen's voice cut through the tension. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, her voice rising dramatically. "I'm going to miss my connection. I have never been treated this poorly in all my years of flying." The irony of her complaint wasn't lost on the other passengers, several of whom exchanged looks of disbelief. Captain Reynolds, perhaps sensing the situation was spiraling beyond what he'd anticipated, adopted a more authoritative stance. "This is your final warning," he stated firmly. "Move to another seat or we'll call security." It was at this moment that Marcus reached slowly into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. With deliberate movements, he opened his camera app and began recording. "I want to be clear about what's happening here," Marcus said calmly, his phone capturing the scene. "I'm being threatened with removal from this flight because I won't give up my assigned seat to another passenger who wants it." Trevor's face contorted with anger. He reached for Marcus's phone. His composure completely abandoned. "Recording is not permitted." He snapped his hand dangerously close to grabbing Marcus's property. Marcus pulled his phone back, just out of reach. "Actually, there's no federal law prohibiting recording on an aircraft unless it interferes with crew duties. I'm simply documenting this interaction for my own protection." The legal knowledge caught Trevor off guard. He withdrew his hand, but his expression darkened further. "What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes? Would you give up the seat or stand your ground? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to click on the subscribe button now to enjoy more of these stories. The next sound that echoed through the cabin was the heavy footsteps of 2 airport security officers boarding the plane. Their arrival marked a point of no return. The security officers moved, with practiced efficiency, down the aisle, following Trevor's gesturing hand directly to Marcus's seat. The cabin had fallen completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the aircraft seemed to have faded away. As all attention focused on the confrontation, Marcus remained seated, his posture straight, his expression composed. Despite the humiliation being inflicted upon him, his phone continued recording from where he had placed it on his lap, sir. The first security officer began, "We've been informed. There's a situation requiring your removal from the aircraft." Marcus nodded once, acknowledging the officer's presence while maintaining his dignity. "I'd like to understand the specific airline policy I'm violating," requested, his voice clear and measured. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat with a valid boarding pass and platinum status." The security officers exchanged uncomfortable glances. It was becoming increasingly obvious they had been called to remove a passenger who had violated no rules, sir. "You need to gather your belongings and come with us," the second officer stated, avoiding the question entirely. Marcus looked directly at Captain Reynolds, who stood several feet away, flanked by Trevor and Jessica. "Am I being removed for refusing to give my correctly assigned seat to another passenger?" Marcus asked directly his question, cutting through the pretense. "You're being removed for creating a disturbance," the captain replied, the words sounding hollow even. As he spoke them, a murmur ran through the cabin. An elderly gentleman in the second row shook his head in confirmation, while a young woman near the back of first class wiped tears from her eyes. With quiet dignity, Marcus began. Gathering his belongings, he closed his tablet case, tucked his presentation notes into his briefcase, and stood slowly. Karen, who had been watching the entire scene unfold, made no attempt to hide her satisfaction. A smug smile played at the corners of her mouth as she watched Marcus being escorted from his seat. Her seat now, she believed, serves him right. "He clearly doesn't belong," came a voice from somewhere in the cabin. "But he didn't do anything wrong," called another passenger. "I'm recording all of this," announced a third. But despite the comments, Marcus was being removed. He walked with his head held high, his back straight, his eyes forward, the posture of a man who had faced injustice before and knew how to maintain his it in its face as he passed by the row where Trevor stood supervising the removal. Something happened that would later become a key piece of evidence. Karen, thinking herself unobserved, slipped another folded bill into Trevor's pocket. "Thanks for handling that situation," she whispered, her voice just loud enough to be captured by several passengers recording phones. "First class should have standards." The implication of her words hung in the air like a poisonous cloud as Marcus stepped off the plane. Escorted by security, he pulled out his phone once more. His fingers moved quickly across the screen as he composed a text message to his coalition. "I was removed from the plane, but they picked the wrong person to humiliate." While most people would be flustered, embarrassed, or enraged after such an experience, Marcus exhibited the controlled composure of someone who had navigated these waters before. "Sarah, it's Marcus. I need you to assemble the legal team immediately." He spoke into his, "Believe there may have been a misunderstanding. The report indicates you were being disruptive, but some witness statements don't corroborate that." Marcus lowered his phone for a moment, his gaze steady as he addressed the officer. "There was indeed a misunderstanding," he replied, "but not on my part. I was sitting in my assigned seat with a valid boarding pass when I was asked to move to accommodate another passenger's preference. When I declined, I was forcibly removed." The officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner, who was already backing away from the situation. They both knew they had been used to enforce something that had nothing to do with security or safety protocols. "We apologize for the inconvenience, sir," the officer offered weakly before following his partner in a hasty retreat. Marcus immediately returned to documenting the incident, reporting a detailed voice memo recounting every interaction, every word spoken, every nuance of body language. "Approached you until they forced you off the plane." She held up her phone, showing Marcus the video, clear, unobstructed footage that captured not only his removal, but also the damning moment when Karen slipped money to Trevor. This was clearly discrimination. The woman continued, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "You should have this." Marcus's expression softened for the first time since the ordeal began. "Thank you," he said with genuine gratitude. "This may be very helpful." They exchanged contact information, the woman promising to send him the full, unedited video immediately and to testify if needed. What she didn't know What none of them knew was that her video would soon be seen by millions. Meanwhile, back on the aircraft, a very different scene was unfolding. Karen Whitfield had settled comfortably into Marcus's seat, her smug satisfaction barely concealed as Jessica delivered a complimentary glass of champagne. "I'm so sorry for the disruption, Miss Whitfield," Jessica offered deferentially. "We want to ensure the rest of your flight is perfect in the galley out of passengers' sight." Trevor and Jessica exchanged knowing looks as Trevor discreetly counted the folded bills Karen had slipped him $200, the price they had accepted to humiliate a man whose only offense was occupying a seat he had rightfully purchased. "Purchased nice bonus today," Trevor murmured, tucking the money into his wallet. Some passengers understand how to show proper appreciation. Neither of them realized that this bonus would soon cost them far more than they could possibly imagine. Suddenly, a call came through to the crew for an emergency meeting. The call was from one of the airline's admin, who informed them that they had just made a grave mistake that could cost them their job. All three were frightened as they looked at each other, trying to understand what was happening. The atmosphere had shifted, and clearly they were no longer in control. Who exactly was the man they removed from the VIP seat and kicked off the plane on the top floor of the sleek glass-walled headquarters of Skylux Airlines? The CEO of Skylux, Richard Williams, was reviewing quarterly projections when his phone rang with an internal call from the Public Relations Department. "Sir, we may have a serious situation developing." The PR director's voice carried an unmistakable edge of panic. "A video is going viral showing one of our passengers being removed from a flight this morning." Williams sighed. "Initially dismissive passengers get removed for disruptive behavior every day. Janet, handle it with the usual statement, sir. This is different." The PR director insisted the passenger was not disruptive. He was a black man in first class who refused to give up his assigned seat to a white woman. "The video shows our staff accepting cash from the woman before and after his removal." The blood drained from Williams' face as he processed the implications. "Send me the video now." As Williams watched the footage on his monitor, his expression shifted from concern to horror, the clear discrimination, the money changing hands, the dignified composure of the man being removed. It was a PR catastrophe unfolding in real time. "Who is he?" Williams demanded. "Have we identified the passenger?" There was a moment of hesitation before the PR director responded. "Yes, sir. According to the manifest, his name is Marcus Richardson." The silence that followed was deafening. "Did you say Marcus Richardson?" Williams finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. Does that name mean something to you?" Williams collapsed back into his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. "Marcus Richardson is the founder and CEO of Right Tech Solutions, the same company we've been courting for a $50 million partnership. The same company that has been quietly buying our stock for the past 2 years, miles away in a private airport lounge." Marcus sat at the center of a rapidly assembling team. His co Elise Thompson had arrived within 20 minutes of his text, bringing with her their chief legal counsel and head of corporate communications. Laptops were open. Phones were buzzing and the atmosphere crackled with focused energy. "The video has already reached 2 million views," the communications director reported, turning her screen to show the rapidly climbing numbers. "Major news outlets are picking it up now." Elise and Marcus exchanged a significant look, one that spoke of years of shared experiences and mutual understanding. "They don't know that we were already evaluating their company culture for the partnership," Elise said, her tone reflecting the bitter irony of the situation. "I guess they just gave us their authentic selves without realizing who was watching." In the Skylux headquarters, the social media team was in full crisis mode. Screens displayed the rapidly spiraling situation. #Skylux discrimination was trending nationally. The video view count had passed 5 million, and celebrities were beginning to amplify the story to their millions of followers. Williams was now surrounded by his executive team, their faces grim as they assessed the damage. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, phone in hand. "I will out. Marcus Richardson's office on the line, so you can request to speak with him directly." The room fell silent. Williams took a deep breath before accepting the call on speakerphone. Mr. Richardson, shares a controlling stake when combined with our strategic partners. The executives exchanged panicked glances, the full magnitude of the situation finally dawning on them. I want to call an emergency shareholder meeting immediately. Marcus continued his tone, leaving no room for negotiation. The events of today have raised serious concerns about Skylux's corporate culture and commitment to ethical treatment of all passengers. An emergency board meeting had been convened with unprecedented urgency. Board members had dropped everything to attend, some still in golf attire, others having clearly rushed from family events. The tension in the room was suffocating as they waited for the arrival of the man who now held their fate in his hands. When Marcus Richardson finally entered, the effect was immediate, and electric conversations ceased mid-sentence. Every head turned, despite everything he had experienced that day. Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who knew exactly who he was and what he was worth. He wore the same suit he'd been wearing when removed from the plane, a subtle but powerful reminder of the day's events. Behind him walked his executive team, Elise Thompson, their legal counsel, and two others whose presence would later prove crucial to the transformation that was about to begin. As Marcus took his seat, Williams used a remote to dim the lights and activate the massive screen at the front of the room. The video began to play crystal clear and devastating in its implications. Every moment was captured: the initial confrontation, Trevor's condescension, the captain's weak justifications, and most damning of all, the money-changing hands before and after Marcus's removal. When the footage ended, the room remained silent for a full 30 seconds. Several board members couldn't maintain eye contact with Marcus. Williams cleared his throat, his face ashen as he turned to address Marcus directly. Mr. Richardson, we want to express our deepest apologies for the inexcusable treatment you experienced today. This behavior does not reflect the values of Skylux Airlines, and I'm not interested in apologies, Marcus interrupted, his voice calm but resolute. The bluntness of his response sent a visible ripple through the room. Board members shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, suddenly aware that standard corporate damage control would not suffice as your largest individual shareholder. Marcus continued, I have one demand and one decision. First, every staff member involved is terminated immediately. Second, I am canceling the proposed contract between my tech company and this airline. Williams glanced nervously at the board members before responding. Mr. Richardson, while we understand your frustration, perhaps we could consider suspensions instead. Some of these employees have been with the company for many years, and our union agreements, this isn't negotiable. Marcus stated, placing his hands flat on the table. It's accountability, or I'll pull my investment and the $50 million contract we were considering. The implications hung heavy in the air. 5% of their stock suddenly dumped on the market would be catastrophic. The loss of the $50 million modernization contract would leave them years behind their competitors. As if on cue, the boardroom doors burst open. A young financial analyst rushed in, clearly having run from another floor. He